PM is to confirm this morning that £1.8 billion more will be made available for the NHS. Well, with us now to discuss this, Christian Niemitz, Head of Political Economy at the Institute of Economic Affairs, and Miatta Fahnbulleh, the Chief Executive of the New Economics Foundation. Morning, guys. Lovely to have you here. Shall we just start with the criticism that is being made of Boris Johnson and indeed of Matt Hancock this morning, that £1.8 billion sounds like a large amount of money, but it's a fraction of the total health budget, and much more is needed. Christian?
Yes, 1.8 billion on its own doesn't sound like very much, but this comes on top of spending promises of more than 20 billion that have already been made, not for immediately, but they're going to be phased in. So on the whole, this is a fairly large increase. But of course, it comes after years of relative spending restraint, of spending increases not keeping up with demand.
Yes, I suppose that is the problem for the Conservative government, is that it's very difficult to start saying, look at all this fantastic money that we're pumping into the health service, when they've been in power since 2010 and have been responsible for trimming.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, let's be absolutely clear. Our public services, and it's not just the NHS, it's social care, it's public health, have been starved of cash for nearly a decade. And, it's not just the fact that, the 1.8 billion is only a fraction of the 6 billion that's needed just for the kind of hardware, the bricks and mortar, the equipment. When you factor into the modelling that we've done at the New Economics Foundation, when you factor in the amount that we would need to actually end austerity, so there are cuts that are happening today across our health system, to end that, you're looking about 5 billion a year, and that's just to stand still. If we then wanted to actually drive improvements, if we wanted to modernise, if we wanted to have a 21st century healthcare system, we're talking about 16 billion a year. So, yes, this is a start, but it's absolutely a drop in the ocean.
I suppose, Christine, the point that is always made at times like this is that actually when you compare us internationally, even before these spending increases on this health service, we do spend quite a lot compared to other, Western nations per capita on our health.
Depends on which country you're comparing it to. We spend about 10% of GDP on healthcare. That's mostly NHS plus some private spending. That's roughly in line with the European average or the OECD average. Of course, some of the neighbour countries, France, Sweden, spend a good deal more than that. But then you can also find plenty of countries that spend about the same or less than that. Australia spends less than that. Belgium spends about the same. It's roughly in line with the average.
So then, is this announcement then as much about political necessity in your mind? That this is Boris Johnson signalling once again that the Conservatives can be trusted with the health service, that the NHS is safe in his hands?
Yes, I think this is clearly politically motivated, but that's generally the problem. If you have a national health service, then the budget is always going to be set politically, and then it gets politicized. It becomes a means of political signaling. Clearly this happened because we now have a new Prime Minister. He wants to start with something popular. If there had been no change in government, then this wouldn't have happened. And that's a big problem with a system like that it always becomes a political football.
Miatta, how did we get into this situation? Because, to be honest, I was going through it over the weekend and trying to find a time during my lifetime when frontline healthcare professionals working in the health service didn't say that they were being starved of cash.
Well, look, the point is need is growing. So we have an ageing population, so there are huge pressures on our health system. And so there's always the need for us to be investing more. I think that the squeeze that we've seen over the last 10 years is real. It is, the point is just to keep standing still to keep up with demand. We've needed to increase spending year on year. And actually what we've done is, yes, maintain real-term spending, but then demand's going here. So there have been actual cuts in terms of the number of people that are working, in terms of the quality of care and services, just in the NHS, and that's not talking about social care. So, people forget that our social care system has been hugely plummeted by this government, and all you're doing is you're robbing from one in order to, in theory, look like you're giving to the other. But the truth is, if you cut social care, it has an impact on our health service. If you cut preventative service, it has an impact on our health service. So we've had a process which kind of just doesn't make sense.
Are we at the point of suggesting that we're no longer going to be seeing PFI playing a role in the health service? Some people suggest that part of the problem that we have right now are those long-term contracts, and we're spending £850 million today on a set of hospitals that are crying out for upgrades.
Yes, I don't think PFI is really the issue here. I mean, it is true there is some evidence that shows that hospital services or upgrades delivered under PFI contracts have been done less efficiently than if it had just been done in-house. But even if it had been financed in a different way, it wouldn't have come for free. Hospital upgrades always cost money, so I think that's not really the issue here. What
are the changes, the structural changes that need to be made to the health service in both your minds, so that we don't have this kind of 4 or 5 year wash, rinse, repeat cycle of politicians claiming that the health service is underfunded and politicians in government claiming that they're increasing funding? How do we get out of this cycle?
Well, if it were up to me, I would switch to a continental European type social insurance system of the type that we see in the Netherlands.
What are the chances of that happening in this country?
Low, but that's why I said if it were up to me. Big if there.
I mean, look, for me, I think 2 things. I think we need to be honest about how much money that we're required to fund our health system, and that's not just the NHS, that's social care as well. And we need an honest conversation with the public that says, if you want a healthcare system that's free at the point of use, it's going to cost this amount, and let's come up with a progressive taxation system to do that. But then in terms of delivery, I think we need to move towards a more kind of devolved model. So actually thinking about the integration of social care and health at the local level, this idea of having this kind of top-down bureaucracies that are run from the top, and you try to kind of administer and control all across the country, is bonkers. It's for like 60, 70 years ago. And actually we need to kind of think about how we drive those reforms so that we have a healthcare system that responds to the needs of people closer to the ground.
Just a very quick question to both of you. Do the healthcare outcomes produced by our health service, is our love of the NHS justified by the outcomes that you see currently being produced?
No.
No, but that's because our NHS still needs reform and our NHS still needs investment. But, you know, I think it's a real right that we should expect to have healthcare free at the point of use. Of course we should. And so actually the political job for our politicians is like, let's get to that system, give us the money we need, and let's drive through the reforms we need in order to deliver that.
Briefly, Christian.
No, the outcomes are not particularly good. I mean, in international comparisons and league tables of healthcare outcomes, the NHS is almost always somewhere in the bottom third. It's normally about on a par with the Czech Republic and Poland.
Christian Miatta Fahnbulleh, thank you both for joining us this morning.